event today. I'm David Carrigan. I'm the UK International Diversity Lead for Live Nation Entertainment, and I'll be chairing today's session where we discuss race in live music. We're grateful for those of you who come and join this conversation, and to our panel who've kindly agreed to share their perspectives. The murder of George Floyd by a police officer sent shockwaves around the world. This horrific act was shortly followed by local, then national, and then global protests calling for an end to police brutality, punctuated by a movement that demanded that we unite and acknowledge that Black Lives Matter. George Floyd was not the first African American to be murdered because of the colour of his skin, and whilst his murder may represent the most acute manifestation of racism, something different seems to have happened since. In the UK and elsewhere, people are grappling with our uncomfortable past. Not only are we becoming more aware of our history, but we're seeing people willing to tear down statues and the symbols of that past. Conversations about racism and race inequality have been deeper. Black people and ethnic groups are speaking out, unfiltered, unapologetic, and demanding rapid change. This time, for many of us, things feel different. When we talk about racism, people are no longer talking about bad apples. The demands for change are also amplified because they're coming from all racial groups, black, brown, and white. And with eyes widened, we are navigating our understanding of how inequality is not only caused by individuals, but by the structures we operate in and interact with. Today, the call is for us to be anti-racist and make our support known. There's been unprecedented support by big business for the Black Lives Matter movement, and the industry itself showed its solidarity. On Tuesday, the 2nd of June, the show paused. Some things are just bigger than music, and the giants of the music community turned the lights off and observed a global blackout. But what happens now, as the lights are switched back on? Our panel today will discuss and debate these very issues, but before we do, I want them to give them an opportunity to introduce themselves. Sumit.
Hi, my name's Sumit Bothra. I'm a director at ATC Management. We have our main office in London and a satellite and our second office in LA with a satellite office in Denmark. We also have a live agency, and we represent around 60 artists for management and about 300 plus on the live agency side. Thanks for having me.
Hello everyone, I'm Kiarn. I'm a senior promoter at Metropolis Music. We do gigs and festivals all over the UK and are part of a bigger entity, Live Nation, who are one of the largest entertainment companies in the world. And yeah, it's a pleasure to be here today. Thank you for having me on. I look forward to having this discussion with everyone on the panel.
Hi, I'm Talwar. I'm CEO of Punch Records. We're a music agency based in Birmingham. We do three things. We tour artists, we run a small festival, and we do quite a lot of work around talent development. In my spare time, I'm also the chair of the UK Diversity Taskforce, which looks at the changes needed to for the music industry and its workforce to be more reflective of the citizens that we serve.
Hi, my name's Lucy. I'm a booking agent at Earth Agency based in London. I'm based over in Barcelona at the moment, and I'm very happy that you invited me for this chat.
Hi, good morning. Well, it's morning for me, but probably afternoon or evening for a lot of you. But my name is Yves Pierre, and I am an agent at ICM Partners. We're one of the, I want to say probably 4 to 5 talent agencies based in the US. I'm based in our New York office. We have an office in LA as well as an office in London.
Great, thank you very much for introducing yourselves. Just as the first question, I mean, one of the things that we've been completely aware about has been the Black Lives Matter movement and the focus on race equality globally. If just from the perspective of someone who is living in the United States, kind of how has the past kind of 2-3 weeks felt to you from an observation point?
For me, I guess I can say that it feels like the world is on fire a bit. It's great to see the conversation around race. But it's sort of like everyone's eyes are open now, which is a bit shocking as well, being that, you know, what happened with George Floyd, what took place with Ahmaud Marbury, what took place with Breonna Taylor. These are not new occurrences for us. So to sort of see everyone sort of rush to say that they're not racist, or, you know, put out statements about, you know, being allies and standing with Black Lives Matter, it just seemed like a fire sale, if you will. But I think that the flip side of that is it's starting conversation. And I think if the door is open, we're going to walk through it. And I think a lot of people are committed to walking through the door and making a lot of lasting changes.
Great. And for other panel members, I mean, from your positions, have you noticed a difference? I mean, one of the things that people have talked about is that this time things feel different. Does it feel like a different conversation, a, you know, more progressive conversation from where you've been sitting?
I think there's been a combination of obviously the incident with George Floyd in Minneapolis. I think the ricochet effect in the UK, the dismantling of statues, the move from the word urban to black. I think there's a triangulation of a movement that it feels like a bit of a watershed moment, but I think now people are very much interested in actions. So the notion of posting something up, or even investing. So obviously all the major labels were quite quick to shout out about specific diversity initiatives and investment for the sector. But I think we need a bit of a root and branch approach, which is about systemic change rather than tokenistic programs that last for a year and then we go back to usual. So I think people are getting used to the word systemic, and I think it'd be really good to unpack what that means later on in this debate.
Great. Other members, does this seem like a very different discussion? Do you think things have moved on or have the potential to move on in a way that they haven't done in the past?
I think obviously coronavirus has played its part in this. People are broke, and that's fueled the fire for them to be even angrier. People have more time to get out in the street and protest. And yeah, I think that a lot of companies that are coming out with these statements, they have been forced into it, but at least that has forced a conversation to start. So I think it's a shame it's had to be forced from my perspective, but you know, it's a good thing that's happened.
Employment, which kind of brings us to the live music industry. I mean, do you feel that the live music industry is racially diverse? And if you were kind of to be asked about it by somebody who's never worked in the industry, how would you describe it? Sumit.
Racially diverse. I think the music industry is by definition extremely diverse. So, you know, and also when you talk about the live music industry, I mean, that is a huge catch-all. It's a big, you know, the live music industry, that's three big words. You know, we're talking about music festivals, in which case, how much diversity are we expecting from certain festivals that specifically cater to certain genres and certain audiences? Are we talking about standalone concerts? Are we talking about melas? You know, are we talking about country fairs? I mean, the live music industry is vast. So in my opinion, I think there's an awful lot of representation. I mean, there is, just by its very nature, people want to perform, they can perform. No one stops you from doing that. However, I do think at the more commercial end of the spectrum, there are certain infrastructures that have been in place for many, many, many years that maybe favor opportunity to certain artists over others. I'm not necessarily saying that that is along cultural or racial lines, but there is a segmentation that occurs at that end of the game. Yes, I do believe so.
So let me challenge that, Sumit. I think front-facing. I think the front-facing components of the music industry are hugely diverse. I think if you look at workforce, so let's follow data, let's follow evidence. Let's not talk from my perspective, which is a privileged perspective. I'm a man, so I have male privilege. So we need to be really honest about the total ecosystem. I think front-facing artists, I think festivals are diverse. In the UK, the workforce industry is not diverse. The data explicitly says it's not. If you look at positions of power and influence, so if you drop race for 1 minute, if you look at CEOs, if you look at boards, you look at governance, you look at where decisions are made, they're not diverse. They're predominantly middle-aged, white, heterosexual men. The data says it. It's explicit. It's in your face. So I would agree the front-facing part is, but the back end isn't. London. Let's look at London, for instance. It's over 40% non-white. The music industry, in terms of senior positions, is 80%, 18%. So it's not reflective of the citizens of London. I don't know what the data says in LA or New York, but you can talk from lived experience, you can talk from an evidence-based approach, and I think we need the totality of both. But I would say, each genre has very specific types of people going to it. I'd agree with you in that sense. So rock festivals are predominantly a rock crowd, but the workforce is not. And I think it's dangerous for anybody to say it is.
I should clarify on that, Ammo, that I'm definitely not suggesting at the moment that my comments are in regard to workforce. So I should be really clear on that, Ammo. I do agree with you on that front.
Sure.
Yeah.
Can I jump in? Ooh.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you about that.
I just want to say one thing. There might be a presence, but true diversity, I think on all sides, there isn't a full, I think we have to call a spade, because even if we talk about front facing with some of these genres of music and, festivals and things of that nature, we have to be honest in saying that the idea of a Black artist if it's a Black rock artist, that artist allowing to live in that space first, if that's where they are, if that's what their music is, doesn't necessarily take place. If you look if you look at even the charts, a lot of artists that might be pop, or might be rock, if they're Black, they have to start in a Black space first, and then they're allowed to sort of once they've reached that level and jumped into another genre, then they're allowed to take up space there. But if you're telling me that there's a Black rock artist and they're going to the that's where everything is starting for them, that's not true. I think we have to sort of take a look at that. Yes, those artists do exist and there are places for them, but whether or not they're given the same entry points, whether they be charts, whether they be festivals, there's sometimes roadblocks there where they have to start, with on the urban side because they're Black. And then they're allowed to cross over and, create a space or an avenue for them in another genre.
So just Lucy and Kiarn, one of the things that when we kind of had a chat a while back, we talked about kind of your career journeys and how you got into the music industry. And, there doesn't seem always to be a defined career path in the way that you would qualify to be a lawyer or something else. Can you just kind of, do you have any views on kind of why the industry is particularly difficult for people to navigate and the importance of things like networks, etc., in that journey?
I think it's quite difficult to navigate because, speaking from experience, I started Metropolis in 2013 as an intern when I was 18 years old. And I remember prior to getting that internship or even getting the interview, I think it was that summer, every single day, looking for jobs, looking for internships, looking for any kind of position within the industry that I could find. And even I think to this day, it's quite hard to find online, or if you're not in the industry space and you're not signed up to, particular mailers from, 18-year-olds point of view with no ties in the industry whatsoever, it was really difficult. And I think that that's something personally that needs to change to, change the faces that we see within the industry, because a lot of the time it won't be given to someone based on merit. It may be given a job given to someone based on who they are or who their connections are, and that's life really in all industries, isn't it? But I think when we look at equality within the industry, from my personal experiences, I've been here 7 years, what I see when I go to most concerts and festivals isn't really diverse, backstage anyway. Like when we look at the roles that people don't see every single day, whether that's the promoter rep, whether that's local crew, stage hands, lighting technicians, sound engineer, the list goes on. Those aren't diverse spaces, personally, and again, the experience that I've had. And that's personally a point I made to David when we were speaking yesterday about how we can action change, how we can train people up if they want to enter, those avenues. And through that, I think others will follow, and that's how we can make a start to a very long road ahead. So.
Lucy?
I feel the same way as Kiarn in regards to diversity behind the scenes. I often can count on one hand, if that, in like when I'm at a conference or a showcase. Yeah, there's a big lack of diversity there. And I've actually gone to diversity panels all run by like white males at things like that too. I went to music college in Brighton at BIM and got an internship while I was there at a record label. So I started with that, carried on doing some more internships, and struggled for a lot of time to find a full-time gig in music, went in and out of doing music stuff and just trying to make money until I found an agent job at another agency before and just started at entry-level PA and worked my way up. Started saying, hey, can I try and get some gigs for that artist? And just was really, really, really pushy and relentless about it until I could take on my own. And that was kind of my journey into live bookings. Yeah.
Okay. And I mean, looking at the panel today, we've got a completely diverse panel of people from across the Atlantic, different ethnicities, different races are concerned. You could look at this and say that really this is proof that the cream does really rise to the top, that your background doesn't have an impact on your experience and your career within the live music industry. Do you think it's as simple as that, or do you think there are other things that the industry could do to make themselves more inclusive, to make the opportunities that you've enjoyed probably more sector wide?
I'd love to comment on that if I can. I don't think it's as simple as that, actually, David, because there are always exceptions to the rule. There are always going to be people that grow up in extremely challenging backgrounds and manage by brute force, by a stroke of luck, by hard work to break through and to buck the trend. But I very much agree with what was said earlier by Amo, which is about going back to the grassroots. If we all accept that we all function within a systemically racist environment, whether we feel we have caused that or not, we have a duty to address it. And what that means is that at the very earliest beginnings of one's life, you can suffer from lack of opportunity and have no relief from that lack of opportunity. And the lack of opportunity and lack of resource gets compounded time and time and time again through generations and through years of life of a human being, such that they end up on the wrong side of the fence. And it's up to us, I strongly believe it's up to us to go into all of those places and be able to affect positive change. And I think that happens at the grassroots level. I also agree with what Kiarn was saying, and also what Amma was saying too about the workforce, and that's something that, again, for us is in a position of responsibility at a management company, for example, when we are going to find people to join our workforce, we have to be aware that it's incumbent upon us to look in all of the other places for people who deserve those opportunities and who want those opportunities, and not do what we usually do, which is go to this recruitment agency and that school, et cetera, and do the usual thing, because it's not going to make any positive difference at all. And in terms of the workforce, it's not just around cultural lines, it's also around the lines of gender too. And that's something we take really seriously. A lot of times you can look at the live music industry in particular, and just it's an old boys club, and it's certainly a boys club. So it's not for me just about paying attention to race. It's also about paying attention to gender too.
I mean, you talked a little bit about the kind of the structure and unpicking the things that we tend to do just because that's the way things have already been done. I mean, given the size of the challenge, do you feel that as a panel, do you feel that this is a question that is too big for music, that music can only play its role if others do, or do you think there is more influence that we have as an industry to kind of move the needle forward?
So I think the music sector, although often when you're in there, we think we're a bunch of liberals who really care about everybody. We have systemic issues. The good thing about music is it absolutely can be a catalyst for change. We have a lot of global tastemakers that can heavily influence people thinking and doing, and every single action from every single person around the globe, around working to create a fairer, more equitable lifestyle, it can make the change. And I think artists, now we're in action mode rather than pause or let me think about what I need to do, or I think action now is really important. I think colleagues, somebody mentioned something earlier around where does diversity, where does it sit amongst the company? And I think it's really important to discuss where does it sit within your organization, who is accountable and who is responsible. And I think that's a really important question to ask ourselves, our companies, our organizations, our trade bodies, because as soon as you find out who is responsible, where responsibility sits. But the hard one is, where does accountability sit?
Yves, from your experience, do you have a view?
To touch on what Amo said, I think the accountability is up to everyone in that organization. It's the accountability, and it's our responsibility. We have to make sure that the companies that we're working for are held to a certain standard, and that certain standard needs to include diversity and rate, and gender equality. It has to. So it's up to you. If you like, I know for me, it's an intentional sticking point because I'm both a woman, I'm a Black woman. So, in essence, it's sort of two strikes, against me in terms of the space that I'm in, being that it is one, a boys club, and two, a white boys club. But it's my personal responsibility that if I want to see the change, I have to be part of that change. And I have to hold my colleagues accountable, and I have to hold my bosses and my partners accountable as well. In terms of, making sure on every structural level, whether it's support, whether executive, that, I see people that look like me. In terms of our involvement in, civic matters, as it relates to community outreach or, mentorship, I have to make it my responsibility that we participate in those areas. If everyone doesn't take the position as if it's their responsibility, everyone could then say someone else is going to do it, or this is someone else's responsibility. And a lot of the times nothing gets done at that point because you think someone else is doing it. Everyone, if this is going to actually, if we're going to come out of this changed, every person has to be a part of that change.
So just on that point, you mentioned that people playing a role as an individual and not waiting for other people to take that up. I think in all of the conversations that we've had in the past, we've acknowledged the role that certain influential individuals have had on our careers. That whilst your talents have undoubtedly seen you be successful in this industry, really there's always been at some point somebody who has guided you, given you great advice, helped you navigate the decisions that you've made in the future, and hopefully going forward you'll be doing the same for others. What has been the impact of those sort of relationships, and what is the sort of advice that you've kind of kept in your mind that's really supported your career until date?
Is that directed at me, David?
It can go to anyone. You're all welcome to
sorry,
answer.
I thought you said my name. No, you know what? Let someone else take it, and I'll chime in later.
Lucy.
I'm going to have to give a shout out to my mom for that one. She's a Windrush kid, came over from Trinidad to London in the 60s. Both her sisters became nurses. She decided to take a typing class, got a job at the Trinidadian embassy, and then she actually worked in the music industry. And I can't imagine what kind of landscape it was back then for a Black woman working in a very, very white male environment. But she's always told me, don't be afraid to challenge the status quo. And I do find with a lot of the conversations that I've had with people over the last few weeks about, what actionables we can do. And I think they get really overcomplicated. Like there's just really simple things that we can implement, like the Rooney's Rule, where you have to interview an ethnic minority. They do that in the NFL for any job role that's open. You don't have to hire them, but you have to interview them. We have to cast the net wider. We should be getting involved in mentorship programs as well. So that's something that we are actively looking into. I'm also speaking with my artists as well about their opinions and what they think they can do with their platforms. And I'm encouraging the conversation to keep happening. I don't know if I went off track there, but.
Absolutely. Kiarn?
So for me, I was quite lucky to have kind of several promoters kind of mentor me when I started off at Metropolis Music. All of them played a massive part in me getting to where I'm at. But I think going back to Lucy's point about some things being made overcomplicated, I agree. I do think there are some really simple things effectively that we can do individually to action change. I mean, some examples I brought up with you, David, yesterday from a promoter's point of view is every show that we have has a budget, and within that budget there are things, examples such as catering. An issue that I've had also recently is why do we as promoters, or why do we as promoter reps spend all of our catering budget in Sainsbury's, Asda, other hypermarkets, etc., because it's convenient, because they drop it to the stage door, etc. When we actually break down, artist hospitality, there's so many caterers out there. Shout out to everyone in South London at the moment doing their food delivery services. It's definitely given me ideas about how we can change the cash flow for these shows. The amount of money that's going out externally can, I think, be looked at, whether it's catering or certain like marketing publications. And I think we need to face that it's time to do things differently. I mean, I know there's an argument, if something's not broken, why fix it? But at the same time, where we've had 3 months of complete time out, now is the perfect time to really think about how we can get other people involved in our business as promoters. And it doesn't mean we have to create a job straight away. There's, as I said, other avenues of work, freelance work, that we can encourage to people that didn't get that work before, long story short.
Fantastic. So, did you want to come in?
Yeah, sure. I guess I had my route into this industry, and I guess in my life, it's slightly unorthodox. I mean, I was born in England, in Leeds, in the north, which was pretty intense at that time. I got called a Paki on a regular basis and all that kind of good stuff, and then moved to Saudi Arabia and lived in Riyadh for 6 years. And then at the first Gulf War, we had to get out of there. So we moved to Harrogate, which is in North Yorkshire. And then I went from there to Virginia when I was 15 And in Virginia, I was in a school which was a Southern school, Confederate flags on the wall, the whole 9 yards, 400 kids. And out of those 400 kids, there were maybe 370 were white, young white males from very wealthy backgrounds, and 30 black males who were there primarily on sports scholarships. And it was an extremely segregated environment. And then went from there to Philadelphia, which was extremely explosively multicultural and people from all diverse backgrounds, where I was at the University of Pennsylvania. And I studied finance and engineering there, and eventually ended up in the music industry because I started working for Virgin Records, promoting their records at parties I was throwing. And the guy that got me into the industry, who made me move to London, is a guy called Paul Berger, who is a Jewish man from Boston. He was at the time the CEO of Sony Music UK, and he hired me and asked me to come and work for him in the UK with an attention on the internet and how the internet was going to affect the recorded music industry. And then I ended up working with a British Asian musician, and then and started managing that musician, and worked within the British South Asian musical community, which at the time was extremely strong and vibrant. And I ended up leaving that community because I found it so difficult, so cutthroat. It wasn't this beautiful utopian, we're doing our thing and we're going to make it work. Like, it was super hardcore. And I left because I felt so disheartened by that experience, and actually the lack of camaraderie. And then started working in the commercial music sector, and now work at ATC Management with a diverse bunch of people. And when it comes to diversity in our roster, diversity in our workforce, we all try hard. We go and look for people to hire. We go into schools. I've always mentored kids in schools from all backgrounds. Our difficulty is finding professionals that are multicultural professionals in this business. It's hard to find them. So we need to help train them and bring them in. And when we do that, we can provide proper representation for artists who can come into our building and feel like they're being understood culturally by people that they can look up to and recognize as their own. So, we're kind of looking at everything with those eyes on. But I think I agree with what Yves said earlier about it being it being everyone's responsibility. Everyone is responsible. Everyone is accountable. And I think that the discussion can be really healthy and compassionate and beautiful if we all work together as a team. But it also has the ability to be extremely damaging and cause extreme racial tensions and put all of the onus onto my white friends and family and make them the problem and ask them to find a solution. And I don't think that's fair. I think we're all in it together. Yeah, there are some bad apples, but we're all in it together, and we should work hard to fix the problem from the ground up.
Okay, Amo, do you want to come in at that point?
Yeah, so I'm going to sound like a bad apple. I'm going to have to disagree with Sumit and Yves. I think we need to understand what responsibility and accountability is, because I agree with what Yves said earlier around everybody's responsible, but we need to identify accountability, because if there's no accountability in an organization, it gets left to everybody, and often nothing gets done. That's the first thing. So I think we have some quite hard hurdles to overcome in organizations. Accountability, I personally think, should sit with the CEO or the chairman, because that person is accountable, and then responsibility can get devolved through departments or individuals. I also think the issue around diversity, that there is a whole sort of debate around where do you find these people? Well, they're out there. 40% non-white in London, but professionals are definitely out there. It's just people are not looking in the right places, and we don't take a root and branch approach in terms of looking at systemic problems. This systemic word that I think I keep using, I think we really need to unpack it a little bit. We have institutional bias or racism. We have structural bias and racism. We have interpersonal, that's microaggressions. That's like, I don't know, a Sikh guy with a big beard saying, well, clear up your beard. We're interviewing some artists. And then we have the whole thing, which is quite trendy, which is unconscious bias, which is all about training. So, and that is the root and branch approach. And I think I'm a hippie at heart. I think, fundamentally at the core, the music industry is not racist. I don't think individuals are racist. I think we have systemic issues that people genuinely find difficult to deal with. There is privilege. It's easy to say white privilege, but I would say gender privilege. I'd say place privilege. So we have to look at privilege. We have to look at our own blind spots. Like everybody seems to know a network. Well, what about the kid in Sunderland who's white and working class, who has no access? How do we, make sure that there's a root and branch approach for him to enter the music industry? This is not going to go away with really simple talent development training, unconscious bias stuff in every single organization. That is not the approach. The approach is, let's look at systems. If we change the systems, we will become more diverse. And I'm going to quote the McKinsey report. The evidence shows you that if you have more women in your organization, it's better for the bottom line. The evidence shows you if your conversations and your staff are diverse, it's better for the bottom line. So there's no excuses anymore. And I think what's happened in the last 21 days, it's accelerated and amplified people's emotions, and it's ricocheting in every single corner of the music industry. And I'm excited about that.
Okay. Any other comments on those 2 points? Yves?
I guess as it relates to the mentorship aspect of it, through my career, I've had women of color pour into me, from intern to, assistant level, to advocating for me in terms of titles or, raises or, things of that nature. Throughout the entire course of my career, from starting on the label side, transitioning to becoming an agent, through that, I guess, maybe 19-year journey, I've always had someone advocating for me or pouring into me. So for me to turn around and do that for someone else is the only way that I can make sure that there are people side by side that look like me in the business. I believe there's a quote about training up a child. We can always go to, in terms of employment, we can go to colleges, we can go to staffing companies and things of that nature. But we have to also realize that people's perception today started probably when they were children. So we have to also figure out our entry point and our access point with people in terms of, is it elementary school? Is it high school? It needs to be definitely before college, because you have to honestly be real with yourself. Some people can't afford to go to college. So in terms of that mentorship aspect of it, I think that we also need to reevaluate entry points and figure out how more involved can we be. And that stems to children, high schoolers, and people in college, because, everyone's circumstance is different. Even our backgrounds on this panel are completely diverse. And we think about the things that we hold on to, and a lot of that comes from our formative years. So I do believe that we have to look at that as well when it comes to talking about mentorship.
Fantastic. I mean, one of the things that we seem to have agreed on is the fact that it's the entry point that's important. Whether you believe that the talent is out there and we need to nurture it and grow it, or whether there are barriers, ultimately there is a need for the industry to increase those gateways into the sector. I mean, as industry-wide, do you think that there is potentially an image problem about live music for some communities? Do people understand the diversity of roles that exist? I mean, we all know that when we're young, we all want to be, front of house dancing, singing, and making loads of money. But like all sectors, there is the kind of machine behind that. Do you think that has an image problem, or people aren't aware of the careers that they are in music?
I would say, yeah. I mean, if you think about the live music all you really get to see is the glitz and the glamour and the flash, the flash in the pan, right? So when you talk about, oh, I want to be an artist, I want to be a singer, I want to be a producer and all those other things, the behind the scenes isn't necessarily as sexy, if you will. But I think if you are honest with what the different roles exist, and you give people access and you give people time to really figure out what they want to do, those perspectives can change. So absolutely, there are tons of kids that don't know that an agent exists, or that, you know, there's a management position, or that, you know, there's a social media aspect to this, and that's a job, right? Even as people come into, I think in all of our jobs, there's a retraining that, no, it isn't just about the music and going to shows and going to concerts. There's actually a job to be had. So whether it's reading contracts, you know, whether it's actually understanding what marketing is, actually understand what demographic is, those are actual things that you have to learn. Those are learned skills. I think that we have to expose people to those things so that they can understand that there's a full workforce behind these artists, and there's something for them to do other than think that they're going to be a producer or a writer. Because if you think about it now, everyone's trying to be an artist. So there's so much content out there that some of it's good, some of it's bad. So I think if we're able to sort of open this up a bit and allow people to see the different jobs that exist, it sort of streamlines all that, and it gives them a little bit more perspective.
And are the things that you've seen in the industry, either from your own companies or wider than that, you think that could create that understanding to create that pipeline for the future?
I know we have our day of service. You know, I think there's things that we do, but we have to actually honestly do more. So everyone has like their day of service where they, you know, go into communities, and whether it's elementary schools and they read books, or it's, you know, you have those job prep sort of days of service where it's about, let's make sure that you have the right outfit, or, you know, you do the resume building. So I think those are great. But I think that opportunities like this, where we get to talk about our profession and what we do, I think those are great. I think that physically being in those other spaces, like taking the time out of my schedule, my colleagues taking the times out of their schedule to physically be where children are, or where we see that people can sort of benefit from the one-on-one, I think that that's going to sort of take it a step further. I think there has to be more of that. You can literally feel me, you can see me, you can touch me, I can be a resource. I think those sorts of things will allow people to tether more to the business side of what we do than just the music side, which they see and get banged over the head with time and time again. So I think it's going to take more of us, of ourselves, pouring into these other avenues and spending real time, having real conversations. And that's one-on-one. That's, you know, not always just on a panel, but I think when people know that you're vested in them and their future, that changes the game, that changes their perspective.
Yeah. So Kiarn, do you kind of have a view of that? I mean, you've obviously kind of had a career that's developed quite rapidly. I mean, how did it stack up to your expectations? Obviously, entering the music industry, most people I speak to say it is not what they expected, particularly the hard work involved and the fact it takes over your life. How did your experience go from your understanding of it before you got into the industry?
I mean, before I started Metropolis, I didn't actually know that being a promoter was a job. I mean, I completely agree with everything I just said. There is such a lack of information as a young person as to how you can get into these roles. But yeah, when I started, I was thankful. I sat next to Paul Hutton, who was managing director at the time, and he made a very, very, very conscious effort to school me on everything I needed to know. I mean, I went into that office with the experience of doing a show budget literally with pen and paper. I mean, I didn't know what a rep was it would be me and my brother that would run all the shows, to sitting down with Paul and having someone really explain, you know, the full 360 of how each individual column in that budget works. And that was really helpful. And it made things a lot easier going forward. And I think constantly having, you know, good counsel around Paul Ray Cosbert was another one. I mean, a massive lesson he taught me quite early on in my career is, as a young person, when you don't have anything, when you don't have any artists, you're trying to build your roster from scratch, you're constantly trying to prove a point. You're constantly trying to, you know, let people know, or reason with people, that I'm just as capable of doing this as someone else. And the term, like, don't mix business with personal. It took me a while to understand that, because music's a very personal thing for me. So if I would pitch for something and didn't get it, I would take it personally, and I would speak to Ray about that. And Ray would always, you know, keep me cool, which was always really important, and just say, look, you've got to take your time and grow little fish. You don't need to try and grab big fish just to show everyone you're capable of doing something, and just take time. And yeah, it hasn't been the most straightforward route for me, but I think it's been one that I'm thankful for, and it's one that I would like to try and recreate for others down the line, coming in as an intern, knowing nothing and no one, essentially, to 7 years later still having a career in the industry and all the connections that come with it. Yeah, I think it's about all of us doing our part and speaking to kids. Like, when I launched the End Festival last year, me and a collective down here made a conscious effort to go to schools and colleges to speak with people one-on-one about what we do, what roles are available in the industry. I mean, a lot of them were kids that are trying to do music. And I mean, at some point, everyone wants to be a musician, right? And you get to a point where maybe that doesn't work for you. And at that point, it would be good to know what else is available backstage or back of house. And there is a lot of, and it's not that hard to do. It just takes, you know, collective effort within these companies to, you know, be more active in schools and colleges, because there are like specialist colleges and whatnot, but they're not always free, they're not always accessible. So yeah, I think knowledge is power, and we should really be sharing that from the ground up.
Great. So you were saying that one of the things that you'd been involved in is like mentoring programs and going into schools. Has that been something that's been facilitated by the organisations you've worked for? Is it something you've taken personal responsibility for? And secondly, do you think there is something industry-wide that we should be doing to talk to not only people who have aspirations for promotion within the industry, but people that may not have even thought it as a legitimate career prospect?
I think for me, the focus or starting where you're at. So for me, you know, it's literally Croydon. It's an area that's going through regeneration, and I wanted to be a part of that. This is historically a place that didn't have much live entertainment, or is in a place where, you know, we don't have venues or much going on, and just lack of information, most importantly. So we took it upon ourselves as, you know, young people from here that have managed to do something within the industry, and just, yeah, pass that knowledge on. I think my advice to, I guess, anyone else would be, it doesn't take long. You know, there's 365 days in a year. Take a day or two, and you could change someone's life. You know, there's someone that could be going through a really tough time, and the words that you have to say might give them an idea that could lead to another idea. And yeah, it's important. It's not, you know, I know we're all busy generally, you know, within the industry, but, you know, I've always believed that the youth are the future, and we should be putting in more effort with young people to drive them, because eventually they're going to take over one day. You know, just the way it is.
And Sumit, just talking about kind of you working in, you know, a large organisation with a lot of power and muscle. Do you feel that, in addition to the focus on making sure that entry into the industry is diverse, is there anything that you feel that we should be doing more actively to ensure that people already in this industry have the opportunities for promotion to move up to the most senior levels?
Again, I think it's a collective responsibility. You could argue, as I'm sure Amo probably will argue with me on this, as with other points, that there's a systemic problem. There's a systemic problem, and therefore, you know, it's the chairman's fault, and the chairman has to make the decision, etc., etc. I think it's really hard for me to comment on that. You know, that would mean that I absolutely agree that I guess people of color, if that's what we're talking about, or we're talking about Black executives, I don't quite know, that they are deliberately not given the opportunity for top jobs. And honestly, I don't know, because I'm not the person that makes the decision of who gets that top job, and whether they're making that decision based on performance or based on other factors. You know, I don't know. honestly. What was the other? Was there another part of that question?
Well, it was mostly the point about whether there needs to be programs within organisation, within the sector, to increase the pace of change. I think one of the things that in other sectors that we've seen, whether it's policing or media, etc., is that the makeup of those organisations is changing, but the progress is glacial. And sometimes the injection of an initiative to increase diversity, whether it's around racial diversity or gender, the Rooney Rule was mentioned earlier, is a possible solution.
I think there's two things, man. There's really two things for me. It's not about just it's about increasing opportunity. You know, it's whether you're like the young white man in Sunderland that Amo referred to earlier, the young white boy in Sunderland who doesn't have access to opportunity. He doesn't know about the music industry, really wants to get in, and we're all the way in London and da. I would see him in exactly the same bracket. If he wanted to get into the music industry and this was his passion and what he wanted to aim for and was willing to work hard for it, I would see him exactly the same as I would a young black man or woman or Asian man or woman in Camden, where our office is. And I would do whatever I could, as I always have done my entire career, to try and elevate them and give them access to opportunity, provide education, introduce them to people or organizations that can help them get into the industry. Of course I would. And I can also tell you that everyone I work with in a professional capacity, either at ATC Management or in the live side of our business or in the wider ecosystem around the artists that I work with, I can tell you right now that every one of them would work a hand in hand with me to do exactly the same for all of those young people out there and bring them in and find those opportunities and help train them. You know, this idea that they're all out there, you know, there's loads of professional Black and ethnic minority managers out there. There's loads of professional Black and ethnic minority people that know about promotions and marketing. That, you know what, then maybe I just haven't met them. I know many of them, but I really don't think there are loads of them out there. And if we can do anything to help change that and fix that balance, I'm all in. And we are paying a great deal of attention to it. And I do believe that the responsibility exists in all of us. I don't agree that accountability ultimately just sits with the chairman of the company. I think that's an easy get out.
Okay, so just Amo and Lucy, just on that point, given the fact that there's a debate about whether the talent is out there, you know, we can either agree or disagree with that point. Do you think it's time that we started to create specific pipelines, specific parts of the industry where people who are from Black and Asian and underrepresented groups can put themselves in the shop window in the way that almost many years ago Black-led business were benefiting from investment from government because they were defined as Black-led business? You think that is a viable solution to some of the challenges that we face?
Yes, 100%. I think we need to be kind of aggressive about this. I don't think that the talent is not out there. I think it definitely is. And I think I'm happy as well to get involved in mentorship and community projects so people see that this is a possibility for a brown person to have a role in this. I don't have authority over the hiring policies, but I can challenge what I see within the company. I do think that we can do things across the industry, like implementing diversity clauses into our contracts. And like I said, the Rooney's Rule, where you have to interview an ethnic minority for every job opening. Because I'm talking to a lot of people over the last few weeks, and a lot of white males say that they kind of just fell into this. And that's not been my experience whatsoever. And I have family in the music industry, and I still feel like I have to really fight to get taken seriously in this as an agent. Yeah, that's.
Thank you. And Amo, from obviously this helicopter position sitting over the UK diversity task force for UK music, is there anything that you feel that the industry as a whole should be doing in order to at least, if organisations are looking for Black businesses or ethnic minority the talent, that there should be a way of actually giving people the ability to put themselves within that bracket and then put themselves in the shop window.
So it's more like a rickshaw perspective rather than a helicopter perspective. So I just want to say that. So I think there's some really simple things that individuals and companies can do. And I think a lot of companies are already doing it. Things like change your interview panel. So you don't have to have the same people interviewing the same types of people. Understand your blind spots in your company. You can, if you struggle with recruitment, or you don't think those people are out there, find the companies that work within that domain. And there are specialist bespoke companies that do a lot of this kind of specialist recruitment or specialist HR work. There's some really quick wins, I think, and I think at the core, I think a lot of companies are doing a lot of this work already. But I think the reason that I talk about systems rather than programs, so I believe in all the mentor programs because I was mentored. We mentor loads of individuals. I'm also I'm just as interested in the middle and the block in the middle. So how do we accelerate that middle tier to become the next CEOs, to become the next chairman? Because I think that's an area that each of the companies really kind of need to look at and go, well, what are the issues? What's the block? Why don't we have a female Muslim woman leading the company, for instance? I just made that up, by the way. What is the block? Is it because we don't look like them? Is it because they don't know about our sector? What are the blocks? And as companies and as trade organizations, understanding the blocks and then really unpacking those things, I think that's, for me, systems change. I don't think having quick fire talent development programs is going to change it. I'm personally all for affirmative action or positive discrimination, however you want to term it, because I think if the system is wrong, then we need to do better to make it right. So what are we doing better to make it right? And we know the system in terms of race and the live music industry doesn't feel right, because colleagues around the Zoom have said that.
Thank you. I mean,
can I say something real quick? Not to totally bang on Sumit, but the comment about talent not existing is dangerous. And you probably didn't mean it in face value, but comments like that, other people are listening, that then becomes the scapegoat. So I would just say that even in these conversations, we have to implore how we give information or give our perspective. We have to be really intentional and really purposeful, because then someone can take that, who heard that message, and that could be the reasoning, why they don't have anyone of a color or Black person on their team, or just whatever it is that they do. I will say that you might not necessarily know where they are, and maybe that's the conversation or that's the statement, but saying that they don't exist is super, super dangerous.
Okay, Yves, I'm with you on that, and actually, again, not my intention to offend by saying that broad statement, but what I'm saying is that for us, the struggle is, okay, it's going out to find those people for sure, and letting them know that we exist as well, and making sure that we're a company that is embracing of all of them to come and work with us, so that we do fix the representation problem.
Thank you. Anyway, I mean, as I say, this is a debate. Unfortunately, we only have an hour, and I know that we could talk in detail about all of the points that you've made. I mean, it's been, a long time coming. These conversations about race in the live music industry are not common. As we said before the call, this is the first time many of us have met each other, which illustrates the need to continue the conversation. But I'd like to personally thank all of you for your contributions today. I do hope that we can have this debate and take the agenda forward. But also thank you to those that you've dialed in to listen to us today. It's a very hot day, and thank you very much for your time, and we will see you again soon.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.